Hey guys, Chad Mureta here, and I'm very excited for today's interview. As many of you know from App Empire, and actually from a lot of stuff that I've done, I've talked about a couple people that have influenced me dramatically. And they've inspired me and changed my life, and really a couple people I hold accountable for the reason that I am where I am. I'm honored to have one of those people here with us today. Lifestyle design pioneer and New York Times best-selling author, Mr. Timothy Ferres. Great to have you, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so I'm excited. You're doing a crazy amount of things, and just to on record to thank you and to honor you. When I was in the hospital recovering from my accident, I was depressed, I was unhappy, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do, and I've always chased after this dream of being able to live this life that everyone talks about and not have work kind of kill you. And I bought a book, 4-Hour Work Week, when I was in the hospital, and I started reading it, and it was probably the first book, the first piece of information that actually put things in place for me and was able to give me that kind of design where I could follow something and get to a point where I didn't have work, taking over my life. And and a few years later, I'm living that life, and I just want to thank you so much for that. I know you touch a lot of people, but for me, I am so grateful for that, and that's part of my mission too, is giving back and teaching people. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Are you kidding? It's hugely meaningful for me, and I find writing to be one of the most difficult things out there. So it's feedback like that that actually keeps me doing what I do. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, speaking of doing what you're doing, you just came out with another book, which I just started reading, and it's tearing up the charts, Mr. 4-Hour Chef. So what preempted that? What got you going to do another book?
Yeah, the 4-Hour Chef, in a lot of ways, is the book that I've wanted to write since even before the 4-Hour Work Week, because my obsession with accelerated learning has been with me since high school, if not even earlier.
Yeah.
And my readers been asking me for a book on how to tackle any skill. So whether it's chess or Japanese horseback archery or Japanese or Spanish or playing the guitar, whatever,
Yeah.
do I have an approach that I use for all of these things? And the answer is that I do. I just never written about it because I struggled with the way to make it fun to read. Since learning, most people associate with school, and I was like, I don't want to do that. And I decided to write the 4-Hour Chef as a way to explain it, kind of like Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. So it's not for people who just ride motorcycles. This book is, even if you never make a single dish in the book, that's fine.
Right.
It's to show how I took something that had beaten me many times before, something I'd quit many times before, learning to cook, and looked at the best people in the world, looked at some of the fastest learners in the world, non-chefs, to figure out how to make a pretty obscene amount of progress in just a few weeks, just a few months' time. And also showing the trials and tribulations. I think that's something missing from a lot of books, and that's true for business books too. I think part of the reason, at least based on reader feedback, that the 4-Hour Work Week did well is I talked about all of these existential issues and these meltdowns and insecurities as part of the process, which it always is.
Yeah.
And for learning something, of course you're going to have hiccups, you're going to have plateaus, but it's at the end of the day, I do think that people can become world-class, meaning top 5% in the world, in 6 to 12 months without too much trouble if you approach it in a particular way. So that's what the 4-Hour Chef is about. And the subtitle is important. So the subtitle is The Simple Path to Cooking Like a Pro, Learning Anything, and Living the Good Life. And I think all three are very closely tied together.
Yeah, makes sense. Awesome. Because I notice, and I noticed it even with my writing, the book that I wrote, and also with some of the programs that we have, everybody wants to obviously learn the information. Everybody wants that outcome. And a lot of people, and it's frustrating on my side seeing that, I want to help them do that, but they stop. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they might buy the book, they might buy the program, they have every intention of reading it, and it just sits on their shelf. And I'm curious from your standpoint, how do we get more people to actually go through the information and take action with it? Is there something that you can say where people can kind of digest and get better results? Because everybody, I feel like, actually wants it.
Yeah. think there are a few ways you can do that. The most important of which might be creating stakes. So STAKES. The framework that I apply to everything after many years of trial and error, because I was neuroscience at Princeton to start with, then went to sort of more of a linguistics approach and looked at languages, because most people fail at languages. They conclude they're bad at languages, just like I had in high school.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be that way. The process that you can apply to that or to sports or whatever is DIS, and that stands for deconstruction, selection, sequencing, and then stakes. But the last is perhaps the most important. Now I'll illustrate that with a story from a friend, good buddy of mine named A.J. Jacobs. He's a fellow human guinea pig. He writes for Esquire. He's written a number of amazing books that are hysterical. One was reading the entire Encyclopedia Britannica, which was called The Know-It-All. He's written a number of books. My favorite is The Year of Living Biblically, where he tried to follow all of the rules of the Old and New Testament for a year.
Wow.
Which is very difficult. And then he at one point wanted to lose weight, and he'd never been able to lose weight before. He described his physique as a python that had swallowed a goat, which I thought was pretty hysterical. And he kind of a skinny fat guy,
yeah.
and he's Jewish. He wrote a check to the KKK for $1,000 in his name, and gave it to his most merciless friend, and said, if I don't lose 30 pounds by X point in time, I'm going to send this to the KKK. And he lost the weight. It's not that he needed more how-to information. He needed a stick, or a carrot, but the stick is more effective to get him to do it. Because, look, we're all busy. We all have a lot of things we'd love to do.
Exactly.
And when you take something that's optional, like following a diet, learning a guitar, learning Spanish, whatever it might be, it's the first thing that you quit because it's optional, right? You don't get fired from your Spanish teacher. You don't get fired from your guitar. You just stop.
Yep. And
the way that you prevent that is by creating stakes. And you can do that with some really easy tools like stick.com, STICKK.com, where you can choose an anti-charity, much like KKK or the George W. Bush Congressional Library, which is the most effective at the moment.
Yep.
And you put money into escrow, and then they have referees on the site. So if you don't do what you say you're going to do, your money goes on the public record to this anti-charity.
Oh.
And I think there are different ways you can approach it. So I work also with a startup called Lyft, L-I-F-T, which is incubated by the Twitter founders, so Evan Biz and some other folks within Obvious Corporation. And the way that you create stakes there is there's just a very mild social pressure, right? So you're held accountable, and you also have people who can give you props, as they call it. And it's the first thing that got me to floss, right? Because flossing is one of those things you're like, I know I should do it. Every time I go to the dentist, I tell myself I'm going to do it. And then maybe you do it for a couple of days, and then you stop. Yep. And the Lyft app is a very gentle nudge way to get that done. So I think that stakes is the most neglected component of all this stuff. And when you create stakes, pretty funny things can happen, and incredible things can happen. But you could do that. I met a guy who gained 20 pounds of muscle in 1 month because he had a competition with his friend to see who would gain the most muscle mass in 1 month, and the loser had to wear a penguin suit around for an entire day.
Nice. I love it.
So you can do something like that. You can create a betting pool. Tracy Rifkin, who was in the 4-Hour Body, mother of 2, lost 90 to 120 pounds.
Wow.
And did it because she put together a betting pool with 6 or 7 of her coworkers that each put $100 in, and the person who lost the most fat by X point in time got the $600 or $700, and that was a lot of money for them. So there are many ways to do it, but creating some type of reward or punishment or embarrassment is really important.
So that's probably more than incentives then, more than incentivizing.
It's incentives. That's all it is. It's incentives. And I can envision where when you have someone sign up for a program or something like that, you automatically have, as part of the sign-up flow, they have to put something on the line. I mean, I could see that being really effective.
Yeah. No, I love it. I definitely love it. So it's interesting. So most people that buy a book, and so they should get clear if this is a priority to them, immediately that's the first thing that they should do is put a stake in place.
Yeah, and if you're not willing to risk $50 or $100 or I recommend 1% of your pre-tax income if you're really serious.
Ooh.
If you're not willing to sacrifice that, then you're not serious about doing it. So why fool yourself and waste your own time? Just don't do it.
Yeah.
If you're serious. If you're serious and it means that much, then put something on the line as an incentive.
Completely. Yeah, and I love the social aspect, especially with Lyft. I've been checking that out recently, and knowing, and I think getting in the social aspect where it's actually people that you know as well that can sit there and jive on you, and I definitely like that. I've just started doing that with my friends and noticing. I mean, I can achieve a lot of things, but there are some things like everybody where I stop at. And so just getting out of my own head and putting it in there, it's amazing how you don't even think about the fear or holding back. You just take action immediately. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool.
No, it's very effective. So that's the kind of stuff that I've studied for a long time. And I mean, that's why the 4-Hour Chef, I think, for a lot of people could be the most important book I've written. And in a lot of ways, I think it's my best book, and I'm proudest of it because you can apply it to everything in the 4-Hour Body. You can apply it to everything in the 4-Hour Workweek. Yes. And you can apply it to really every skill that I have tried it on and seen people try it on, which is exciting to me. So whether it's, I used it for skiing, I used it for swimming.
Oh, nice.
And it's extremely versatile.
So I'm curious because you've been, obviously you've been a student of this for a while, figuring out, learning and how can I do certain things. And you've been wanting to write this book for a while. So when you actually decide that you're going to write it and you started going through that process, was there a few things or maybe one particular thing that you learned that you didn't expect to learn? Because obviously you're at a high level and you're going in to write this book. So is there anything particular that stands out to you that, kind of shocked you?
Yeah, the first one that comes to mind was the approach to learning flavors is actually very counterintuitive. So
really?
I had a lot of trouble remembering flavors. Let's just say, I know this sounds ridiculous, maybe, that someone knows how to cook. I couldn't cook. I mean, I microwaved liquid egg whites, maybe on a good day, and protein shakes most of the time. Otherwise, then I ate out. That's all I did.
Yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah. I didn't cook at all. So I had so much trouble, even after trying to taste them, telling, let's say, basil from cilantro, from thyme, from rosemary, whatever. I know it sounds silly to me now to say that, but it turns out I learned later, if you're going to collect flavors like baseball cards or learn them like vocabulary, which you really have to do to learn cooking quickly, you can't just taste it and then magically remember it. At least I couldn't.
Right.
And so I partnered with some people from the Manel Sensory Institute, PhDs in olfactory, neurology, and whatnot.
Yep.
And they sent me some research that indicated that there are taste receptors not only on the tongue but in the throat, and even as far down as the stomach and the small intestine. Really? So what I tried with maybe 5 or 6 spices and herbs that I couldn't remember. I was just like, I'd ask a million times, like, is this cloves? Is this basil or whatever? And I do it over and over, and I get extremely frustrated. I ground them up. I just kind of ground them into a powder, broke them into small bits, and then I would steep them in little bowls, like tea, and then I would taste it like wine, and I would swish it around and swallow it. And it wasn't until I started swallowing this like spice or herb water that I nailed every single one. And that was pretty cool to me, to realize that there are taste receptors so far inside the body, which doesn't seem to have an evolutionary purpose necessarily, but that is the case.
That's incredible.
And just like a lot of people don't realize, for instance, if you're trying to manage depression or something like that, neurotransmitters aren't just produced here. A third or so of your serotonin, right? People think of the feel-good neurotransmitter, what Prozac acts on. A third of it is produced in your gut. So if your microbiome, right, your intestinal bacteria is all out of whack by, let's say, consuming too much Splenda, that could be contributing to your depression. Right. So learning to sort of look at the body holistically can accelerate your progress in all of these things. And that was really fascinating to me.
Interesting. And where do you think, Yeah, I mean, there's obviously so much to learn, and especially with our bodies. Our bodies are such a unique, you know, collection of things going on. So, and I know you, I believe you are part of a company that's basically, you know, measuring your blood and stuff like that. Do you feel
Yeah.
like, you know, we have a lot to go in that area, and that there's constantly, are you jumping into that arena?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very involved with the self-tracking and blood diagnostics and things like that. So WellnessFX,
Yep.
just wellnessfx.com is the company that you're mentioning, and I can look at all of my blood results and trending on my iPhone now through them, which is pretty cool.
Nice.
And I'll be doing a lot more in the sort of quantified self world. I've already done quite a lot, and I've been involved for a long time. I was at the very first quantified self meetup.
Oh, wow.
And I still have my notes from that. But
Nice.
I would say that the future is going to be probably something closer in the very near term. And I'm actually invested in a company that's doing this, but something like a nicotine patch that tracks hundreds of different biomarkers 24/7, as opposed to just getting a blood draw once every few months or once every year, which a lot of people do. And I would suggest doing that kind of stuff every 2 to 3 months, because you can't really trend properly otherwise. Oh yeah, but I think that's just as important as checking out your bank account to make sure that things are in order, or looking at your credit card statement. You should be looking at the credit card statement of your body, I think, at least once every 3 months, certainly.
Yep, yep. No, I definitely agree. And I mean, yeah, my hope too, I'm interested in that stuff as well, just dealing with the stuff that I've dealt with pain and having different allergies to foods, and just trying to discover what's going on. And I feel like most people are not educated in that field. They're not, they just go to the regular Western medicine, and unless there's something majorly wrong. And so to get something like that into, at least for people to understand it and get it in their hands, so they're actually doing it where it's not crazy expensive, that's exciting. That's very exciting.
Oh yeah, sure. There's a lot coming, and it's going to get super cheap.
Nice.
Just like microchips. I mean, I think that Moore's law is going to very quickly. It already applies to this physical tracking, and it's just going to become more relevant. So there's going to be, oh man, I mean, even in like 3 to 5 years, there's going to be some just amazing stuff.
I love it. I love it.
I'm very excited about it.
Nice. So yeah, that brings up actually a question I've had for a little while, and I've noticed it. Obviously, I'm in technology, right? So I love technology. I love the leverage, what you're able to do. I know that I can get an app developed and out to the whole world, download from countries that I didn't realize were a country, in a week, which to me is incredible. But I also see people, I see the times that we're in, and I see kids with their phones and stuff like that, and especially with with what you're interested in, being able to learn and teach people skills. Do you feel that people they're dependent so much on technology at this point, where they're not learning how to actually spell certain words because they're relying on spell check or voice commands and stuff like that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's maybe a Fight Club analogy to be made. There's a Tyler Durden quote from that movie is, the things we own end up owning us. And I think that in many cases the technologies that you use end up owning you. And it's become important to me, for instance, to get better at functioning without technology. Partially because I find it fun, and it actually gets you outside in a lot of cases, which I think is good for animals of all types, including humans. But I realized at one point, without GPS, I couldn't function. Right. I mean, even let's say 10, 15 miles from my house, if it's in a part of the city that I haven't visited much, I would just be completely lost. And that was a wake-up call for me at one point, because my GPS was stolen out of my car.
You're like, no!
That's the mission, yeah, San Francisco. So but I realized how dependent I'd become on it. And that's also true with phones, certainly, email. Feeling this low-grade anxiety if you get separated from your technology, I think can be really unhealthy. So as much as I embrace tech, and I'm obviously very involved with tech investing and advising, I personally think it's important for health and for sanity to get away from tech for stretches of time. So I'm actually really fascinated. I've become really interested in orienteering competitions, where you have to use just like a map and a compass to find these points
Yep.
over potentially a very large, square mileage, and I might end up playing around with some of that because it appeals to me,
Yeah.
and I feel like learning those skills has a lot of ROI. Whether you're hiking or otherwise, and won't stop my fascination with tech, but
Right.
I'm really trying to return to basics with a lot of this stuff personally, just for my own sanity and health.
Yeah, I've got a couple of buddies that do like adventure racing and stuff like that, and it just blows me away. And I'm starting to look into it myself because I see us being able to rely on each other and get away from technology and just figure things out like we used to. How valuable that is. But what specific stuff would you say for people, like chunkable actions that they can take? Because I feel like everybody has this issue where they're glued to their phone or their device and they're relying on it, and they don't really have anything specific to take away, where they, maybe shutting off their phone after work and connecting with somebody, or like, do you have anything specific that you found out for you really works?
Yeah, definitely. And these are simple recommendations.
Yeah.
At the very least, start with making Saturday your device-free day. So I really try to make Saturdays, at the very least, my device-free day. That means, ideally, no phone, i.e. iPhone, no smartphones, and no computers. And that means a few things. It means, number one, just like in the days of old, like 15 years ago, you have to plan your day in advance. And you can't have everyone be late to everything and just say, sorry, running 10 minutes behind. You actually have to plan your day. But the ideal circumstance, and this is what I tell people, is just put in a calendar note every Tuesday that says, plan the weekend. So that you're not trying to decide what to do on the weekend when you wake up on Saturday morning. Because, of course, the first thing a lot of people will do is, by default, because they don't have something planned, check Facebook, check email, check Twitter, and 4 hours later realize that half the day is gone, and then they'll spend all of Sunday trying to catch up and do work for at least half of Sunday, so you've never had any downtime. So my recommendation would, at least on Saturday, recognize that if someone sends you an email on Saturday, tomorrow's Sunday, they can wait until Monday. And if they can't, is this really a sort of career model or work model that you want to embrace forever? Probably not. It's not sustainable. And so that would be the first step, is making Saturday devices free day. And it's extremely relaxing, even to take one day away. A lot of people don't realize just how relaxing it is. So that would be the first step in sort of Technologists Anonymous.
Yeah. No, I realized that too, just on my travels, not having a phone, going to Brazil, or even now I'm in Tahoe, but I'm really secluded, not trying to use technology or my phone and just get away on the slopes. I mean, you come back and it's like you've been away for 3 months and you just have a complete new sense of energy. Appreciation for life, because you're not getting bombarded by all this information and people and stuff like that. You can just like take a breath, which makes you a lot more effective.
Oh yeah, I mean there is a physical toll to all of this input, and I think it's important for people to realize that.
Yeah, and I noticed too, 5 years ago, you're waiting in line for something, you're at buying tickets, or you're at the supermarket, and before you used to daydream, you just sit off and look up and you start to daydream and create stuff in your mind that you wanted to do, and now people are not processing that. They're actually looking down and they're just reacting to that stimulus in front of them. So that's one thing that I've tried to do as well and tell people is, put away your phone if you're in line and just let your mind go. Let your mind go where it goes and be creative and go on that.
Yeah. So a few things I've done. First is you can actually use technology to fix certain problems of technology. So you could use something like rescuetime.com, or there's something called Freedom. It's a program also that will block, say, the internet or Facebook or Twitter or social media sites for a period of time.
Nice.
So you can do that. Secondly, I purposefully have a Verizon iPhone and not an AT&T iPhone because I do not want to be able to use it when I'm overseas. So when I take overseas trips, I just got back from London and I didn't have any text messages, any phone calls for a week.
Oh, that's great.
Which was great. And because oftentimes it's like texting becomes just as bad, if not worse, than email.
Yes.
it just becomes another form of instant messenger.
Yep. Yep.
I think that's really critical. I'll be taking a pretty extended period away from the stuff very, very soon.
I'm sure.
But another story for another time, perhaps.
Yeah. So do you have, I mean, speaking of like schedules and productivity and, having your bounce, so to speak, on your life and being fulfilled and seeing friends, how regimented are you? You every single day, you plan your week, the week before, and you have every hour scheduled. What's the life of Tim Ferres like, scheduling like day to day?
There are a few things I would say. The first is I try not to fragment every day into multiple types of tasks. So, for instance, right now I'm still at the tail end of the 4-Hour Chef book launch.
Yeah.
So I'll take, for instance, an entire week and dedicate that to interviews and meetings in Los Angeles. Right? And then I'll take a 3-day stretch and dedicate it to meetings and media in New York City. And I will only or primarily do those things. And then if I have, let's say, paperwork, accounting, these types of things that I have to deal with that, I will block out, say, a Monday and just focus on processing that type of work. Rather than saying, I'm going to do emails for this period, phone calls for this period, and bouncing from one task to the next because there is a cost, cognitive cost, and a time cost to doing that. So I really try to batch those things. For instance, if I'm checking email, I'll try to identify the email threads that are best addressed via phone. Then I'll make a list of those things, and then I'll use either my normal phone, Google Voice, or Skype on my iPhone to address all of those while I go for an hour-long walk in the sun to get to a point where then I can sit down and do something else. But I'll try to batch those calls together.
Oh, that makes sense.
And but I wouldn't say hugely regimented. I have certain rituals, let's say in the morning with my tea and whatnot, that I like to stick to because it helps me to have a calm entry into the day.
Yes.
But I'm trying to calendar less, actually. So if it's not mission critical and someone's like, hey, let's schedule a call for this, like, just try me. And if I can do it, I'll pick up. If I can't, I won't. But really trying to calendar less because I think that's a source of, at least for me, is a source of stress. When I commit to too many things and have all of these fixed interruptions for the next 3-4 months, I find that anxiety producing. So I'm trying to do less of it.
Yeah, me as well. No, it makes sense. I've tried to do 3 hours of work on this, 3 hours of work on that, and I get it melts together, and I get stressed, and it's not that productive. And I definitely see what you're saying. Just sticking to one thing and focusing on it, and just getting it done, even if it's for a week or 3 days. But that's your main outcome, and don't splice yourself too thin.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Very cool. So yeah, one thing that I've gone into too, obviously I've learned a lot of different things, and some things stick, some things don't. And so I'm curious with what you've learned, and especially in the 4-Hour Chef, is there something that someone needs to do? So for instance, now you can identify, with your taste buds, you can actually tell if it's cilantro, if it's mint, or whatever it is. Do you feel like that's going to go away? Is there something that you have to do to kind of harness that skill?
The taste, surprisingly, to me perhaps, is very persistent. So it was harder for me to gain that vocabulary, but it's also it doesn't seem to go away. And I think there are different types of different skills. Obviously, some have more persistent effects than others. I mean, now that I know how to swim, I'm not going to forget how to swim, even though I couldn't swim at all until 3 years ago. But if you take something like, I speak 5 languages, including English, which is again really amusing because I concluded I was bad at languages when I tried to learn Spanish or had to learn Spanish in school. Wow. But I've toyed around with other languages, let's say Turkish or Greek or even Vietnamese before I go to these countries for trips, just for fun. And I fully anticipate that I will lose whatever I learn or forget at least, let's say, that small amount of Turkish that I learned before going on the trip. But it doesn't mean it's not worth learning it then, because I find that even with 20 or 30 sentences of a language, and you know this, your experience of visiting that country is 20 times richer, and people are so much friendlier, and people will go out of their way to help you just by making that effort. So it depends on the subject matter, but I think more than the, obviously I want people to succeed with their learning goals, these outcomes.
Yep.
But it's also important to me that people learn to love the process of being the detective who figures out a skill.
Yes.
And then makes rapid progress.
Yes,
and
yes,
if you enjoy the process, whether you maintain it or lose some of it or not doesn't matter as much, because it's very enjoyable. And you also have the confidence of knowing that, let's just say with German, I forget German very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, I don't remember a lot of my German, I'm not maintaining it, but because I know how to learn a language, including German, like if I'm going to Germany in a month, like I could get back to speaking very well within a week or two. It would not be a challenge at all. So just having the confidence that you don't have to cling to all these things and be fearful, because you have the toolkit to pick it up the first time, and you have the toolkit to reactivate these things.
Yes.
And I use the term reactivate because the mind is an incredible thing, and I've noticed some really odd things that would seem to indicate that it's very hard to completely lose something. I remember when I was learning German the first time in 2005, and I got to a fluency point that was similar to my Chinese, maybe, let's say, 6 years before, but I had thought that I'd forgotten all my Chinese, and then I would be speaking in German, and I would remember all of this Chinese. It just started coming out. And so I do have my approaches for sort of reactivating forgotten languages also, which I've written about on the blog as well. But yeah, I think that the toolkit can be used many, many different ways.
Yeah. So is there any, I know you've written about this as well, but just for the people watching, is there certain things, maybe a few things that they can make the process fun? Because I agree with you. I think that is actually the main component to staying with anything is that process. And I feel like a lot of people, they haven't figured out what actually makes them have fun or enjoy that process. And so they keep doing the same thing, expecting different results, and then they get fried,
Yeah, there are a couple of things. So the first would be in the deconstruction chapter of For Our Chef, I list the questions that I use when I'm interviewing experts. So let's just say I'd found you, and I wanted to learn a new sport. So we could pick anything. I mean, I did this with surfing, right, for instance. And the way that I went about, well, with surfing or anything, is I would look for, like, silver medalists, Olympics, sport, and then the city name, right? Let's just say if I'm looking for someone local. But looking for someone who was very close to being the best in the world, or the best in the world, some time ago, and then spending like $50 on a Skype session, honestly, and interviewing them like this. And I have a list of questions which would include things like, how did you train to become the best? How is it different from how you train now? Who are the most controversial coaches, and why are they controversial? What's your opinion? What can someone take away from what they teach? Like controversial, successful coaches, right? Who are people who are very good at, say, surfing or what you do, who shouldn't be because they're really old, really fat, really slow, whatever, it doesn't matter. To figure out how those people use technique to overcome their lack of attributes. And I have this sort of list of questions. And when you go through those questions with an expert, it's really not that expensive at all. Then you can immediately double, triple, quadruple your learning speed. I mean, it's just from a 30 to 60 minute Skype session like this.
Wow, okay.
And I remember using Skype video when I was in Berlin a few years ago. No, not even. It was about a year and a half ago. To learn surfing pop-ups with the former #1 ranked surfer in the world, a guy named Brad Gerlach, Gerlach. And he was in Los Angeles. I was in Berlin in my apartment, and he was on a surfboard. And we just did Skype video back and forth. So he would demonstrate, and then I would do it on the floor, and he would critique my technique. Went back and forth. So I learned to do surf pop-ups with former #1 ranked surfer in the world when I was in Berlin, and he was
awesome.
Los Angeles. And you can do that with just about anything. I mean, the technology makes it so much easier. So that kind of stuff is fun because it's not. It's exploring. It's not sitting down in a classroom and listening to a professor drone on for an hour. It's really becoming a detective and figuring these things out And there's a recipe for it. You know, that's why I provide these lists of questions in the 4-Hour Chef, for instance.
I love it. I love it. Very cool. Yeah, and we talk about that a lot too. Emulation for me is everything. Just, reverse engineering success, and obviously it leaves clues. And that's, for me, not being a technical person, it's easy to kind of figure out what's working and then put my own spin on it. And some people have challenges with that, obviously emulating other people. What do you feel is something for people to actually to be able to emulate and get successful at it versus just copying something verbatim and it goes nowhere? So there's a little innovative component to that. But besides just doing a Skype call, which I think is great, is there anything else that you can kind of advise on emulation and emulating somebody?
Yeah, there are a lot of ways to go about emulating. I think that people are very bad at self-analysis, and it's not necessarily their fault. For instance, I mean, I remember when I was first doing the tango in Argentina, and I mean, I went from my first class to World Championships in about 6 months, and I took it very seriously. But I was watching a lot of video, and I was taking a lot of video of techniques. And I thought I'd nailed, 80% of it. I was like, I know I have a long way to go. I think I've nailed 80% of it. And then I finally decided to take video of me dancing with someone else, and I was just like, oh my God, that looks terrible. It looks terrible. I just had no idea that I was screwing up so many aspects of it. I just couldn't tell. And so I think that whether it's filming yourself for something physical like that, recording your voice for foreign languages, for instance, this is actually why Chinese 101 at Princeton, I think, was one of the most effective programs in the world. And I took a lot of Chinese classes all the way up to the most advanced at Princeton. But after our first year, went to China for an exchange program, and the Princeton students had by far the best pronunciation of any of the students who were a part of this program.
Wow.
And a lot of the other students had to start over. And the reason I think that we were so good wasn't because we had any special skill. It's because every week we would have to go to the language lab and we would read a dialogue. So we had to read like a few pages of dialogue and record it. Then we would send that recording to the professor, who obviously had the dialogue printed out, and he or she would circle the points where we sounded non-native. And then we would go sit in a private class with them for an hour, and they would just run us through these sounds and these words or these sentence constructions over and over and over and over again until we could hear the difference. And did that every week. And I mean, man, our pronunciation was awesome. I mean, and I'm not saying it's perfect, but it was so far beyond anyone else.
Yeah.
And it's because we had that built-in feedback loop.
Yep.
So I think that reviewing your own work critically and having other people review your progress or attempts is very, very important.
Which scares people.
Anyway,
they're like,
anytime you tighten that feedback loop is really important.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people, they get scared of that, and that probably is one of the most important things to do, because if you don't know what you're doing, you can't see yourself, and it's hard to kind of course correct to get to where you want to get to.
Yeah, you can't. So I use that whenever possible. And in everything that I do, I always think about, how am I going to get feedback? How am I going to have someone else point out the things that I'm not seeing? Because of course, if you're a novice, you're not gonna. If you're playing the guitar and your fingers are like slightly off, or you've developed a bad habit, like who knows what it might be?
Right.
You're not gonna know.
Right.
So I use video feedback a lot. I use video recording quite a lot. It's so cheap. I mean, you can just use your iPhone or flip cam or whatever. I mean, or you could just use this camera right here.
Exactly.
It's so inexpensive. I try to use it whenever possible. Photographs and video, really, really helpful.
Nice. So do you go into everything you want to learn? Because everyone's obviously different, and you have different skills that some other people don't. So do you go into it like, okay, what is holding me back? What is my weakness? What's my block? And what am I good at? And then you attack it that way?
Yeah, definitely. And I very frequently look at things that maybe a portion of a skill. I try to identify the things that have maybe caused me to quit or fail in the past, and then look for methods that will allow me to avoid those things in the very beginning. So, for instance, with swimming, I identified, I broke the skill down. This is the deconstruction step. I broke the skill down to all the different, I was like, well, learning to swim is too broad, right? And so a friend of mine decided that my New Year's resolution would be swimming a 1 kilometer race by the end of the year. Very specific. Okay, great. Now I have my goal. And then I took swimming and I broke it down into all these parts. And anybody can do that. You don't have to know much about swimming. It's just like, okay, well, I could do breaststroke. I could do freestyle. There's kicking. There's arm motion. There's breathing. And I realized that the breathing and trying to breathe caused me to panic. And kicking exhausted me. Like using kickboards, I could never do. I still can't use kickboards. I just don't move for whatever reason. So those two things then led me to ask the question, what if I had to learn to swim without kicking, really, or having to breathe, which I know sounds funny, but by asking that question, I was able to find a method called total immersion, which is amazing, and I go through it in the 4-Hour Body and the 4-Hour Chef, that allowed me to minimize kicking, number one, so I didn't expend a lot of energy, and it had me had a very logical progression of drills, so I didn't have to worry about breathing for the first, 10 drills. And so by the time I got to the point where I was breathing, I was already performing everything else without having to think about it. So it wasn't overwhelming and it wasn't stress-inducing.
Yeah, nice. Makes sense. I love it. Very cool. So yeah, I guess a lot of information here. I absolutely love it. I definitely appreciate you taking the time. What is next for you? Obviously you're in the launch right now for 4-Hour Chef. You're killing it. It's on the charts. Your other 2 books are right there as well. What is? Yeah. I mean, after this, you're gonna take a break for a while. You're gonna do a 4th book, or you've done so many different things. What's next?
I'll take a breather. That's next. So I'm not in any rush to write more books, and I'd like to try something outside of books, just because I've spent so much time in nonfiction books for the last whatever it is. I guess
carry the one.
I mean, there's 5 years plus.
Yeah.
7 years, and I think I'll focus on probably a new language and surfing and drawing. Those would be 3 of the things I'd like to explore in the next few months.
Nice.
And I'm just going to take it one day at a time. I'm trying not to feel rushed, because I don't find that I don't particularly feel good, and I don't make particularly good decisions when I do so feeling rushed.
Yeah.
I'm trying I will definitely hit the pause button or slow motion button on things once the launch wraps up. But it's an exciting time for me, because the 4-Hour Workweek is back on the New York Times bestseller list.
Nice.
And 4-Hour Chef, 4-Hour Body could both be on the bestseller lists.
Nice.
And there only have maybe 4 authors who've done that before.
Really?
So yeah, I mean, just a handful. I mean, Malcolm Gladwell maybe, and perhaps 1 or 2 others that I can think of. So
nice.
Yeah, I'd like to see if I can get the trilogy back up there, so that people also view it that way, because I think the 3 really go together in an extremely integral way. So I'd like to try to have people view it like that.
Well, awesome. Well, we're definitely going to help for sure. These books are incredible, guys. I've read both of them. I'm reading the 4-Hour Chef right now. And we're going to put together a little package to buy all 3 to help Tim with this. And it's going to help you out. It's going to help your family out. Give these books away to people. I know a lot of my friends are raving about it, and they've given the books to their family, their friends that are in these circles. They don't realize all this education. A lot of older people, they don't realize kind of the way things have happened. And Tim's broken down so many different things. And so what we're going to do, I'm going to personally coach. I'm going to do a group coaching call for anybody that buys all 3 books. And I think, Tim, what I'll do is I'll just have you guys send me an email. Send it support@appempire.com. Send us the actual receipts of those books, and we'll put your names together. I'll do a coaching call and give you some free bonuses too. I got a couple things up my sleeve, and then Tim, I'll forward you to those those receipts.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. I mean, what I'll do, guys, that's very generous of you, first of all, so thank you.
Yeah.
And I'll throw in some goodies as well. So I mean, if you were able to send me an Excel spreadsheet of the email addresses or something like that, I'll send some goodies to you guys as well.
Perfect. Yeah, and I want to again honor you for changing my life with your 1 book, and actually 4-Hour Body. I've been all over the place seeing doctors as well with that. So I want to thank you with that, because cool. I mean, my arm, being able to use it again honestly, it has to do with me seeking out these professionals, going to Dr. Bueller in Utah, and I feel like I know all these different doctors you went to because I've gone to them and heard your story through their eyes. So
Cool.
I'm very appreciative of you, man. I really am, and I honor you for what you're doing. And I know everyone from our community and our group and our blog will get tremendous value from these books. And make sure, guys, that you don't just read them and don't do the things that you want to do with them. Again, stakes. Get some leverage on yourself and make that stuff happen. But anyway, Tim, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
And I'll catch you in the city.
All right, man.
Take care, boss. See ya.